Hello, CBC Youth and anyone else who are watching, and welcome to a special questions video because I actually get to be the one asking the questions today. I'm joined by Ron Belsterling, Sam's dad, and longtime youth pastor. So that would actually be kind of an introduction to you. My first question would be, what's your background like? How'd you get into youth ministry, and then what was it like being in youth ministry for so long?
Okay. I started counseling in camps, and I realized a lot of kids needed help, and I didn't really have a career goal. I really felt a tug on my heart to follow the Lord and help struggling kids. At that time, I wouldn't have known to call it a calling, but it definitely was.
Right.
And so I've been doing youth ministry ever since I, was in high school. At the end of my high school years in college, I've been working with kids. I took my first youth pastor. Actually, when I went to seminary, I was running the youth group in a Lutheran church at home. Then I switched gears and took a youth ministry in New Jersey, did youth ministry there for multiple years. Then we moved up to Syracuse, and I did youth ministry there for 5 years. And then I brought my kids to a Christian college to check it out, and I ended up talking to the professor of youth ministry there, who got very excited to know I was working on a PhD, because not many people in youth ministry are working on PhDs.
Oh yeah, not many.
And that weekend I interviewed for a position to teach at the college, which I had brought Sam, your boss. He was, I forget how old he was, maybe 6 or 7, running around the office of the dean while I was doing my interview. So then I ended up continuing to do youth ministry, but teaching youth ministry for 20 years at Nyack. While we were there, we started a Young Life ministry with a couple other couples, and that really, God really blessed that. So we were on that committee for 10 plus years. We started Young Lives after that, and started working with troubled teens. And then I've either been working with youth or teaching young adults and youth my whole adult life, really, up until the last year.
Man, that's mind blowing to me. I've got 7 months under my belt. So
well, it's a blessed place to be. I think it's harder for you today than it was for me, but it's a different world.
Yeah. Did your students ever call you old?
Oh yeah, I asked one time at a retreat. I was in a room with 6 guys. We were all in our bunks, 2:00 in the morning, and one of the kids asked one of the other kids, when do you think someone gets old? And the guy was chewing on it for a little bit, and he said, Ron, how old are you? And I said, I'm 30. And he said, you're old when you're 30. So I was like, okay, I wanted to get out of the bunk and smack him around a little bit, but I didn't. I held back.
Yeah, I'm 22, and I get called old. 2 weeks ago, we were doing some yard work, and one of the students stopped me from picking up a pile of leaves because he said my back was probably bad. And last week we were playing football, and they had me be wide receiver, and I went out, and they went, how are you so fast? You're so old. And I was like, it's like I'm 5 years older than
Oh
you.
yeah, they think someone like, if they think you're old, they think, I'm like, why, how am I still alive?
Right. But yeah, my second question for you would be, and this is really broad, so feel free to take it for a walk. What do you think would be something that students should understand about being in youth ministry?
That it's something they should want to do. If they're only there because they have to be, then they should talk to their parents and you and regroup on that idea, because it's not anything you have to do. It should be something you want to do. And if there are things about it that you don't like, kids should take ownership of it. One of the things I used to say to kids in my youth group all the time is that God just sent me here to be the steward of this. This is your youth ministry. We can do whatever we want to do with it, whatever you want to do with it. Wherever you want it to go is where it will go. And so I try to encourage that the kids who took on the youth ministry had a sense of ownership for what we did in the youth ministry. And I think choosing some of those kids to leadership positions that they felt convicted by. Like at one point in one church, we did not have a youth worship service for the whole church. But one kid felt convicted that that's what she wanted to do. And I said, okay, well, let's make that happen. And we made it happen. So we had different kids at different times get convicted that they wanted different things to pop up into ministry. And sometimes those things worked really well and lasted, and other times they didn't, but it was their ministry and they really bought into it. And I think that's really where they got excited for it. And it really propelled interest in their parents more into the idea of ownership of ministry too. So I guess that's an answer to your question. What would I want kids to know? Hey, own your youth ministry. If there's something that you don't like about it, work with Dawson to change it, fix it, take it in another direction. Let's see, something else. It's not here just for you. You're not the end goal. God wants to use you to own this youth ministry so you can reach other kids, so they can know the same hope that you have, the same joy that you have, the same peace that you have. And if you're thinking, yeah, but Ron, I don't have that joy, I don't have that peace, I don't have that hope, then start connecting with kids who do. Start reading your Bible more. Start, doing a one-on-one with some of the adult leaders in the youth group, and pray to want a more loving, deeper relationship with God. You guys can change the world. Another guy you could interview around here would be Chris Coakley, who's at another local church. He was a former student of mine, and basically his youth group started a ministry where many years later that youth ministry was digging water wells in Muslim countries. So it's your ministry. Grab it by the bullhorns and run with it.
Right. Yeah, that's a great answer. And you mentioned parents as well, and there probably are some parents of students watching. What do you think parents should understand about youth ministry and should take away from youth ministry?
A couple things. Youth ministry shouldn't be just something to babysit your kids and get them out of your hair for a while and to keep them busy so they don't get in trouble with other bad kids, quote unquote.
Right.
I mean, I actually hope that there are some kids that you might identify as bad that are showing up at the youth group, because without those kids in your kids' life, look, in today's culture, there will be a tendency for you to want to shelter your kids to the degree that they never interact with kids that you're nervous about. But if you shelter your kids in that manner, they won't interact with those kids, and then that means you are stifling their opportunity to minister to kids who need their input. And the one thing I've learned about youth ministry is a lot of troubled kids will respond more to other teenagers who are loving on them, that are in the normal world or in the normal crowd. That will draw their interest. They're attracted by the idea that adults will pour their lives into them too, but they're also attracted that other normal kids, and today normal is one of the bad words that has shown up with all the other bad words, program, etc. But a lot of kids would just drink in the idea of being able to be normal. They might not say it, they might not articulate it, but that's what they want. So I would say to parents, let your kids interact either through an event that you guys have, or maybe by inviting a kid from school that they're kind of friends with, but maybe doesn't come from a godly home. Invite those kids to youth groups so they can grow, and so your kid can grow while he or she is helping another kid to grow. That's the way they're primarily going to grow. If it's only truly Christian kids that come here all the time and have Bible studies, well, then it's an end. It's not a means to the end of really sharing in the partnership with Jesus Christ, of sharing the gospel. Let's see. Parents should also be ready to help. Youth ministry can't run without the assistance of parents. Now, a lot of youth workers try to keep parents out. I never tried to keep parents out because I felt like they had an invested interest. Now, if I did a small group, I wouldn't put Johnny's dad as the leader of Johnny's small group.
Right.
I would try to mix it up with different parents. And you'll have some parents that are wanting to help, that you're not some of you, you're like, man, I don't really know the Bible well enough. I can't teach. Well, you know what? You can always use a van driver. You can always use someone who can work in the kitchen on a retreat or something like that. So parents, you've got to see Dawson as your partner, as an ally. He can come along and you'll know it. I guarantee you, some of you have had your kid come home and say, wow, Dawson's really smart. He said that we should blah, blah, blah. And you two, when your kid goes to bed, you two will say, well, didn't we tell our own kid that 28 times and they never heard us say it once? Well, that's what Dawson can do for you. He's your partner. He and all the other adult leaders in the youth group are your partners. If you rely on each other, you're better off. Here's another thought. Your kids will sometimes complain to you about Dawson, but guess what? They will also sometimes complain to Dawson about you. You need to be there for one another and have each other's back. When a kid complained to me about his or her parents, I would say, okay, let's talk about what you can do. I will talk to your mom and dad, but let's talk about what you can do in that situation to help your mom or dad grow and mature in Christ. Is that fair? Not necessarily, but sometimes that's the way it is because kids are excited to grow, and oftentimes adults are overwhelmed by cutting their grass, grocery shopping, paying the bills, and they don't get as excited to grow. It's really, if you let your kids grow, you will find that you also will grow in Christ.
Yeah, I mean we've got families in the church who've experienced that, which is awesome. So another question for you, with again, just abundant experience in youth ministry, like unimaginable for me at this point.
You'll be sitting here one day.
Oh, I hope so. and I hope that who I'm talking to is just as young as I am now. But what would you say to someone, a student, or even someone who's older and ends up watching this, who starts feeling called to youth ministry? For myself, it was a daunting call. It was a scary call. So what would you say to encourage a young youth pastor thinking about it?
First of all, some of you might be feeling a tug on your heart, an interest, a curiosity, a desire. You might not define it as a call. That's okay. I couldn't define it as a call either. Right. Basically, I had no idea what a scriptural call actually necessarily was. I couldn't have defined it when I first felt it. But if you really enjoy working with young people, if you see that God has given you a good relationship with some fruit and mixing up with some kids your age or a little bit younger, then talk to Dawson and ask for help. Hey, how can I refine this? Can you give me ministry opportunity where I can test this, where I can explore it? Maybe a junior or senior in your high school group could start working with the middle schoolers. Maybe if it's a middle school kid and they are feeling the drive, give them some leadership responsibility within the youth group itself. Or maybe they could help with the younger kids. Here's the one thing I knew too. When I first went into youth ministry, I had leadership teams of kids. I usually tried to fill certain positions with task-oriented responsibilities. And I found that the kids really, while they might at first get excited for that, they weren't necessarily always excited about that. The kids who were truly had some sense of a calling, even if it wasn't going to be professional, I would give them relational responsibilities. Hey, we have these 6 kids who have shown up at youth group the last 6 months, but we haven't seen them. Can you get together one-on-one with each of the kids? Just go to Starbucks or have them over to your house, play some video games, see where they are, develop a relationship. I found that there were certain kids who were in that ilk of, man, I'm feeling an interest of being like Jesus. They far more not only enjoyed relational ministry opportunity, but they did better with it. Now, there are some kids who are a little overwhelmed by that, and they prefer some of the background stuff, being on the worship team, etc. That doesn't mean that they aren't called. When I taught at Nyack College for 20 years in the youth ministry department, the other guy and I were very different. I had the relational orientation. He had the task orientation, but he spent his whole life. Len Kegler, look him up at Amazon.com. He's written 20 youth ministry books. But he was a task-oriented person. Now, when you're a relational-oriented person, you have You have to do some tasks, otherwise you won't have a job. When you're a task-oriented person, you have to realize you have to get relational. So Len would create relational opportunities that were in his task to do checklist. And I learned from him that that's actually, I kind of applied something like that before I got to working with him, but I just saw how good he was at creating relationship, even though he wasn't good at being in relationship. Or he wasn't, I shouldn't say he wasn't good at it, he wasn't oriented to it.
Right.
I probably took that answer a step beyond where you wanted to go.
Oh, no, you're good. I mean, I've had to joke with our students about that because the pastor before me, Mario, was like very charismatic, and like I had to joke with the students in my first couple weeks, like, you're getting a different type of youth pastor. Like, like you're gonna have to give me some grace. I'm not gonna be quite the same as him.
Oh yeah, we're different. Yeah. But listen, I do want to say this. Young people, there is no better place, and I know my son is the lead pastor, Sam. Hi, Pastor Sam. I know he's the lead pastor, but there's no better calling in ministry than youth ministry.
100%.
I mean, it is the best place to do ministry because the people are still excited about growth and change and maturity. They're excited to change the world around them. They're not bogged down with the super long-term adult weight that other adults are bogged down with, or not just, but their own stereotypes and pessimism. I mean, when you get to be my age, you get to be more pessimistic. Young people don't have that pessimism yet. So youth ministry is a great place to go. You're not going into ministry there for the money, the paycheck. You're not going. No. You're not going in for the prestige. You know, no one looks at you and says, "Oh, that's the youth pastor."
Yeah.
You're not going because you have power. You really have very little power. Everybody thinks they're your boss, and you're not.
Yeah.
What did every parent tell you to have before you would take kids on a missions trip?
Have a good vacation half the time. It's like, yeah, I'm taking 28 of your kids on a missions trip, and you struggle to take 2 of your own kids on a vacation. Yeah, I'll have a good vacation. Yeah. I mean, you always do enjoy it. You're blessed from the fruit of it, but
you're tired.
But it's not a vacation.
Yeah,
it's far from a vacation.
I had 6 cups of coffee in one day on our last retreat. So
that's what you got to be careful of. I overdrank Mountain Dew when I was a youth pastor. You got to be careful of that. You start life habits that aren't healthy, and it's hard to break them.
But yeah, it's even funny that you called Sam my boss earlier. I corrected someone last week that we're co-elders.
Co-elders.
Equal eldership.
Well, I get it. Yes, you're co-elders, but there has to be a lead. And, there are hard aspects of the lead. When I got in certain situations that were difficult, I would tell the lead pastor and be like, okay, now it's his.
Oh, yeah. It's been a joy to do that.
I just dropped it off in his lap, and now it's your responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah. So for 1 or 2 more questions, what would you say back to students again, what would you say to students who maybe are a little more apathetic towards the ministry, don't see the value of youth ministry, and who are choosing not to come, right? They're putting other stuff on their Sunday schedule so that they miss out on it.
Yeah, I'd say, I'd give them the answer that you just said. Bottom line is you're missing out. I mean, there's nothing better in life than getting to know God on a deeper level. If you're in a good church that has an active youth ministry, that's a blessing. You can never get those years back. You can never replace them. You may think that other things are more interesting, curious, cool, but life isn't about being cool. Look, just watch some old TV shows. The cool kids always end up bald and fat. And I know that's not what it's not about being cool. It's not about being entertained. It's about having a purpose and living to that purpose. Participating in a youth ministry can make you feel like your days have more meaning. Look, I've heard so many teenagers say, I'm bored. And they pick other activities on Sunday to address that are entertaining-oriented options. You know what? You'll do that, and then within a couple hours, it's gone, and you got to replace it. If you're invested in a ministry, in your own growth and getting to know God, and in helping other people get to know God, at the end of the day, when your head hits the pillow, you'll say, wow, that was a valuable day. There was something to that day that was different than the day before when I played video games for 18 straight hours, or when I, played soccer for 18 straight hours. There's nothing wrong with playing a video game. There's nothing wrong with going to soccer and have healthy relationships with kids that like soccer. But it's not about you at the end of the day. It's about you, God developing a relationship with you, you getting to know the creator of the universe in a special one-on-one way, and allowing him to use you to make a difference in other people's lives. That's what I would say. And if you're thinking, nah, that's not really what I want, well, God is kind enough, and he's not a dictator, and neither is a church. You get what you want. You can blow off church. You can blow off youth group. You can blow off God. But in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, when you look back, I've talked to that's my job now. I told you this the first time I'm talking to a bunch of adults who look back on their days when they were teenagers and they wish they could change different things about what they were doing, so that they could have lived with more intentional pursuit of understanding God and having a good relationship with God. You don't have to give up. You hardly have to give up any other thing that you like, because any of those things can be vehicles for you to do ministry in. There's just far greater purpose with them than am I happy at the end of it? Because you might not. You might play on every soccer team there is, but sit the bench for 5 out of 6 teams. And you might even score all the goals. How many musicians who have become famous have ended their lives? How many athletes who have lived for that Super Bowl trophy or World Series trophy have said a week later, yeah, now that I got it, it's now what?
Yeah, I would agree 100%. And piggybacking off of that, again, going between students and parents, what would you say to maybe parents who are apathetic about the value of youth ministry, who don't see the value in driving an extra half hour on a Sunday night to bring their students to it to participate?
Yeah, I would say you're shooting yourself in your foot. The bottom line is, if you're part of a church that is giving you a viable youth ministry, that half-hour drive, you couldn't spend it any better. Because I guarantee you, if your kids are fairly normal, they will share things, they will hear things from other kids at a youth group meeting that they wouldn't talk about in other places, that they'd be afraid to talk about in other places, that they'd ask questions that they'd be afraid. And you know what? My kids were awesome, and we had a great relationship with Sam and his brother and his sister, but there were many times that they would not ask us what they asked other kids or their youth group leaders. And we loved it. If you are a parent that sees it as an inconvenience, trust me, the inconveniences will be far greater down the road for you and for your kids if you blow off these opportunities. Now, am I saying that going to youth group is going to turn your kid into a perfect kid? No. But what you're doing is increasing the odds that your kid is going to feel much better about life and be a contributor to life instead of bored. And so if you're having a hard time taking your kids, you should rethink that one and pray about it. Not to mention, it could give you great opportunity to maybe have a good conversation with your kid beyond the basic, hey, what did you do today? Did you like your sports? When I would take my kids to youth group or pick them up, maybe 4 out of 5 times, we didn't talk about anything that was deep. But 1 out of 5 times, we did. And I wouldn't trade those trips back and forth for anything.
Right. Yeah. Just to now to kind of wrap us up, and this is a loaded question for someone with all your experience, but what would be kind of a highlight of youth ministry? And as someone, he has a very good book that I'm reading right now. I would love to hear you actually tell one of your famous youth ministry stories.
One of my famous.
Yeah.
Well,
because you've got some awesome ones that in reading I just want to hear more explored.
Before we get into that, there's another book that somebody else wrote out there, Kegler and Hobbs, the guy I worked with, called Don't Do This. And it's all the mistakes that youth ministry people make. I have a lot of stories in that book. So if you like my stories, you'll learn what not to do by picking up that book. And it's not just my stories. I mean, I used to use that book in my classes, and students would say they would laugh out loud at all the stories. Now, some of them aren't like you don't repeat those mistakes, but you learn from them. I think one of my most favorite experiences that I ever had was just one situation where I was pouring into this young lady through the youth group, and just enjoying watching her be interested in God and be interested in a Bible study and worship songs and singing them. And I really felt convicted, hey, this is a conversation I need to have. Where do you stand relative to Christ? And I mean, I knew where she was, because when she first started hanging around, she was curious, but she didn't have a relationship with him. And I thought, I have to follow up on that. Too many youth workers don't follow up and say, hey, would you like to have a relationship? I mean, because I can sit down with you and help you walk into that. Now, it's not just a simple prayer and you're done, but there is a step that you take that people can look back on and feel confident. This is a day, even if they don't remember the date, this is the day that I got really serious with God, and he blessed me for it. And so I went up to her one day and I said, hey, you can pray to be a Christian. You can ask God into your heart and stuff. Do you want to take that step? And she said, oh yeah, I did that a couple months ago. And I was like, woohoo, we're doing something right. She understood that she could do it on her own, and she didn't need to do it with me. I was grateful that I had actually felt convicted to ask her, because God wanted me to be blessed, not by the experience of doing it with her, but blessed by her answer to the question.
Right.
And it was just, that was great. And of course I have other good stories where, I think my favorite story is where we were on a missions trip in Kensington Ave in Philly. And that these guys were assaulting a woman across the street, primarily kicking her rough. And I said to the kids, we got to go down and help her. We're looking at these big windows, and they're like, what can we do? All the kids were we had a very prestigious choir in our church, and they were, all we can do is sing. I said, then we're going to go down there and sing. Second Chronicles chapter 20 came alive, because that's where God sent out the musicians before the guys in the battle. And so we went down there. I kicked open that door, and I didn't know if they were going to be with me or not. And I thought, well, I'll sing. And that would have been bad probably. But so they came out and they could sing. And we just stood there and sang. And this lady crawled over to us and fell asleep at our feet. And those two guys that were kicking her, they stayed away from us and they left. Yeah. And about an hour, maybe 2 hours later, one of the kids in my youth group, now they were singing much more happily. Because she said, I think they're afraid of us. Yeah. And I said, yeah, I think they are. They're afraid of God's power in us, of the light that we are shining. They don't quite understand it. But you know what? They're not just afraid. And I don't know if I wrote about this or not. They're probably curious. Why would we be doing this? And attracted by it.
Yeah, that is awesome. And you have to assume probably one of the weirder experiences for most of the people involved.
Oh my goodness. Oh yeah. I mean, their lives, by the end of this trip, we went into Camden, New Jersey. We switched out from a Dominican Republic beach trip. It was usually just a big vacation with the name of a mission trip on it. We went into Camden, New Jersey, Philadelphia, PA, because Camden and Philadelphia were right beside where we lived in Haddonfield, a very affluent community. And then we did, for the, another dimension, we went up to Toronto, but it was all inner city work. And oh yeah, I would love to bump into those kids today if I don't have any social media, but there's no doubt in my mind that the majority of those kids, their lives were changed.
Right.
Yeah.
Now they get to tell those stories.
And they get to tell the stories. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I think we'll wrap it up there. So Ron, thank you so much.
Oh, sure.
What an honor.
What an honor for you to ask me to do this. I mean, yeah.
You would be, in my field, you would be the prestigious one. So thank you.
Do not. Hey, youth workers, if anybody, youth workers sees this, don't aim for prestigious. Look, you read my book. There are too many people in my position who are drinking up the prestigious. Yeah. And I called a lot of my friends out on that. Yeah. And that's why a lot of people wouldn't endorse my book.
Well, thank you again, and thank you everyone for watching this. If you have any questions, reach out, and I'll try to get you in contact with him. But thank you. See you next time.